A quiet nurse was grabbed from behind in an empty corridor of a naval hospital, humiliated in front of doctors who thought she was too weak to fight back. But the moment the aggressor touched her neck, something ancient woke inside her, something trained in places no one in that hospital had clearance to know. Minutes later, when a half-dead SEAL arrived, whispering a code that existed in no medical chart, everyone realized the woman in bright blue scrubs was not hiding shame. She was hiding an identity, powerful enough to shake the entire base. Before we begin, hit the like button, subscribe, and tell me in the comments what city you are listening from. Welcome to the Silent Badges stories, and stay until the end, because what they discover about this nurse will change everything. Don't move. The hand closed around the back of her neck before the voice finished the words. Grace Holloway froze in the east corridor of Coronado Naval Medical Center with a stack of clean linens pressed against her chest and a mop bucket rattling behind her ankle. The corridor was empty, almost empty. The fluorescent lights buzzed above her. The floor smelled of bleach. A security camera blinked red at the far corner, but the lens had been turned toward the wall 2 days earlier, and no one had fixed it. Grace knew that. She knew every blind spot in the hospital, not because she was planning anything, because old habits never died. The hand tightened. A man's thumb pressed under her ear, not hard enough to choke her, hard enough to remind her he could. "You ignored me twice today," Dr. Evan Kessler whispered close to her hair. "That was rude." Grace kept her eyes on the wall. White paint, cracked near the baseboard, water damage above the supply closet, one exit behind him, one stairwell 27 feet ahead, one metal IV pole beside the crash cart alcove, one ceramic mug in his left hand, judging by the clink when he shifted. Her breathing slowed. In, out. Let him think she was afraid. Let him think he had control. "I need to return these linens," Grace said. Her voice was quiet. Kessler laughed under his breath. "That is what I like about you, Nurse Holloway. Always pretending the smallest job is sacred, always acting humble." His hand slid from the back of her neck to the edge of her shoulder. Grace's fingers tightened around the linen stack. Not yet. A younger nurse turned the corner and stopped. Molly Parks, 24, new graduate, too gentle for this place. Her eyes widened when she saw Kessler behind Grace. Kessler removed his hand at once. "Problem?" he asked. Molly looked from him to Grace. Grace gave the smallest shake of her head. "Do not step in. Do not become his next target." Molly swallowed. "I was looking for flushes." "Then look somewhere else," Kessler said. Molly disappeared. Kessler leaned closer again. "You see, nobody helps a woman who refuses to help herself." Grace looked down at the bright blue sleeves of her oversized scrubs. They made her look younger than 36, softer, smaller. The badge clipped to her chest said, "Grace Holloway, RN, temporary assignment." Temporary. That word had become her cover. Temporary nurse, temporary life, temporary name on a temporary badge. Kessler walked around her, slow, enjoying the performance even though no audience remained. He was 42, sharp-faced, clean-shaven, and handsome in the way cruel men often were. Expensive watch, polished shoes, white coat tailored too tight at the shoulders. A trauma surgeon who talked about saving lives as if the lives should thank him personally. "Look at me," he said. Grace did. His eyes were pale blue and empty. "You embarrassed me in Bay 4. The patient was allergic to cefazolin." "I know what the patient was allergic to." "You ordered it anyway." The slap came fast. Not full force, not enough to bruise immediately, enough to turn her face. The linen stack fell from her arms and burst across the floor like white flags. For 1 second the corridor held its breath. Grace's cheek burned. Kessler smiled. "Careful," he said. "Women like you survive by staying useful, not by correcting men who outrank them." Grace lowered her gaze. Her left hand trembled, on purpose. The tremor always convinced them. It made people relax. It made predators step closer. It made arrogant men believe they had found prey. "Pick them up," Kessler said. Grace knelt. 1 sheet, 2 towels, 3 pillowcases. A door opened behind her. "Doctor." Malcolm Pierce stepped out of the resident lounge with a paper cup of coffee and stopped at the sight of Grace on the floor. Kessler did not move. Pierce saw the linens, saw Grace's red cheek, saw Kessler standing too close. Then Pierce looked away. "Everything okay?" he asked, but his voice already knew the answer. "Nurse Holloway dropped supplies," Kessler said. Pierce nodded, as if that explained everything. "Try to keep the hallway clear," he told Grace. Then he walked past. Grace kept gathering linens. Her cheek pulsed. Her old self watched from somewhere deep inside her skull. That old self was not trembling. That old self was measuring angles. Wrist, elbow, knee, throat. "Stop, breathe. You are not that person here." Kessler crouched in front of her. "There she is," he said softly. Quiet Grace. Good Grace. The kind who learns. Grace looked at his shoes. A faint smear of blood marked the edge of the sole. Fresh. Not from a patient room. The pattern was wrong. A thin drag mark, not a splatter. She filed it away. She filed everything away. That was why she had lasted 8 months. 8 months in Coronado Naval Medical Center, a hospital built close enough to the water that the air carried salt into every vent. A hospital that treated sailors, Marines, dependents, contractors, and men whose units were never printed on their charts. A hospital where everyone wore rank or chased rank, even when the badge said civilian. Grace had arrived as a transfer nurse from a small urgent care in Oregon. That was the file. That was the story. No one had asked why a woman with trauma skills too sharp for her resume wanted the worst night shifts in a naval hospital. No one had asked why she flinched at helicopters but not at gunshots. No one had asked why she could read a room faster than most security officers. They had seen a quiet nurse in oversized blue scrubs. So they had decided she was nothing. That made hiding easier, until men like Kessler made it dangerous. "You will apologize to me," Kessler said. Grace folded the final towel. "For what?" His smile vanished. "For embarrassing me." Grace stood slowly. Her cheek was still red. Her hands were full of linens. Her shoulders rounded forward in the posture she had trained herself to wear. Small, harmless, forgettable. "I'm sorry the patient almost received a medication that could have stopped his breathing," she said. Kessler stared. The apology was shaped correctly. The blade inside it was not. His hand moved. This time he grabbed the front of her scrub top and shoved her backward into the wall. The linens dropped again. Grace's head hit the painted concrete. Paint flashed white behind her eyes. Something old woke fully. Not anger. Anger came later. This was colder. A switch moving from safe to threat. Kessler's face hovered inches from hers. "You think you are clever?" Grace smelled coffee on his breath. He had moved his weight too far forward. Right knee locked, left shoulder open. Thumb loose on fabric. Bad control. Worse awareness. She could break his wrist in half a second. She could drive his face into the wall before he blinked. She could put him on the floor without killing him. She could do many things. Instead, she lowered her eyes. "No, doctor." Footsteps sounded near the nurse's station. 2 corpsmen entered the hall pushing an empty gurney. A respiratory tech followed, laughing at something on his phone. All 3 stopped. Kessler released Grace and stepped back. "Nurse Holloway became lightheaded," he said smoothly. Grace bent to gather the linens for the second time. 1 corpsman smirked, the other looked uncomfortable. The respiratory tech laughed once, then stopped when Grace looked up. For just 1 second, her eyes were not quiet. The tech looked away first. Kessler adjusted his white coat. "She is fine," he said. "She just needs to learn balance." The corpsman moved on. Grace stayed low. She waited until Kessler's footsteps faded toward the trauma wing. Then she stood, Molly was watching from behind the medication room door. Tears filled the younger nurse's eyes. "Grace," Molly whispered, "I saw everything." "No, you didn't." "But you saw nothing." Molly stepped into the hall. "He can't keep doing this. He grabbed Olivia last month. He cornered Jenna in the locker room. Everyone knows." Grace's gaze sharpened. "Everyone knows?" Molly wiped her cheek. "Everyone. And no one reported it. People reported. Nothing happened. He brings in money. He saves special cases. Command likes him. Administration protects him." Grace looked toward the trauma wing. Kessler was already gone, but the blood on his shoe remained in her mind. "Go back to your unit," Grace said. "Are you okay?" Grace picked up the linens. "I have been worse." Molly's face changed. Most people said that casually. Grace had not. The overhead speaker crackled before Molly could answer. "Trauma team to Bay 1. Trauma team to Bay 1. Incoming military casualty. 3 minutes." The corridor shifted. Doors opened. Shoes squeaked. Voices rose. Grace's pulse slowed again, not from fear, from recognition. Military casualty. 3 minutes. Every hospital had a rhythm before chaos arrived. Civilian hospitals scattered first, then organized. Naval hospitals organized first, then denied they were scared. Grace walked to the linen cart and placed the folded stack inside. Molly still stared at her. "Go," Grace said. Molly ran. Grace turned toward the trauma wing. The first ambulance siren cut through the night outside. Then another sound followed it. Not an ambulance. A low convoy rumble, heavy engines, multiple vehicles, tight formation. Grace stopped walking. Her throat closed. Not here, not tonight. The trauma bay doors opened ahead of her. Staff flooded in. Dr. Pierce shouted for blood warmers. Kessler's voice rose above the rest, confident and sharp. "I want airway at the head. 2 large-bore IVs. Prep chest tubes. Move like you were trained." Grace remained at the edge of the hall. Her body knew the sound outside. Black SUVs, military transport, escort pattern, urgency without panic. The kind of arrival that meant a patient was important, or dangerous, or both. The ambulance bay doors burst open. Cold night air swept through the trauma corridor. 4 men in tactical gear rushed in around a stretcher. They were wet from the rain. Mud on boots, salt stains on sleeves, no unit patches, no readable names, faces hard, eyes scanning, not standard base security, not regular Navy. Grace stepped back into the shadow near the supply alcove. The man on the stretcher was covered in blood from chest to hip. His uniform had been cut open, gauze packed under his left arm, a pressure dressing over his upper thigh. Oxygen mask fogging weakly. His skin was grey. One of the operators shouted, "Male, 39, blast exposure, penetrating trauma, airway compromised." Junctional bleed controlled in field, losing pressure in transit. Kessler moved to the stretcher. "I have him. Transfer on 3. The injured man's head rolled toward the hall. Grace saw his face. Older now, beard streaked with grey. One scar through his eyebrow, blood at his mouth. Her entire body went still. No. His eyes opened halfway. Not focused, not conscious, but his lips moved. The oxygen mask muffled the words. Grace heard them anyway. "Blue Lantern 3. The operator nearest the head froze. "What did he say?" No one answered. Kessler tore the oxygen mask aside. "Sir, can you hear me?" The wounded man coughed blood. "Blue Lantern 3, he rasped. A monitor alarm screamed as they rolled him into Bay 1. Grace gripped the metal edge of the supply cart. Blue Lantern 3. That code had not existed in any chart. It had not existed in any open military record. It had been burned from reports 11 years ago. Only 5 people had known it. 3 were dead. 1 was lying on that stretcher. And 1 was standing in bright blue scrubs, with a red mark on her cheek, trying not to become a ghost in front of everyone. Inside Bay 1, Kessler shouted for rapid sequence intubation. Pierce called out vitals. Pressure 68 over pulp, heart rate 140, sat 84. "Tube tray!" Kessler snapped. A corpsman handed it over. The injured man's right hand fell from the stretcher. Grace saw the tattoo on his wrist, small, almost hidden under blood, a black lantern with a broken handle. Her stomach dropped. Chief Nathaniel Rourke, call sign, preacher. The man who had once dragged her through surf under machine gun fire while telling her she was too stubborn to die. The man who had watched her disappear after Operation Blue Lantern. The man who believed Grace Holloway was dead. Kessler leaned over him with the laryngoscope. "Open!" Rourke gagged. Blood bubbled. Grace moved before she decided to move. 2 steps into Bay 1. Then she stopped. "Do not expose yourself. Not for one patient, not for one ghost." Kessler forced the blade too deep. Rourke's oxygen saturation dropped to 78. "I can't see cords," Kessler said. "Too much blood," Pierce answered. "Suction." The suction catheter clogged almost immediately. Rourke's chest rose weakly, then stopped moving on the left. Grace's eyes tracked the trachea, deviations starting. Neck veins rising, breath sounds absent left side even before full intubation, tension, pneumothorax. They were missing it. "Sat 72, Molly called from the monitor, voice shaking. Kessler cursed under his breath. "Give me a smaller tube." Grace stepped closer. "Needle decompression first." Every head turned. Kessler looked up slowly. The red mark on Grace's cheek was still visible. His eyes narrowed. "Get out." Grace looked at the monitor. "He has a left tension. You will lose him before the tube passes. You are not assigned to this bay. 14 gauge, second intercostal space, mid-clavicular now." The room fell silent for half a second, not because of the instruction, because of her voice. It did not sound like Grace Holloway. It sounded like command. Kessler stood straight. "Security." Rourke's eyes opened, clouded, feverish, dying, but he saw her. Saw the ash-blonde hair pulled into a messy bun, saw the hazel eyes, saw the tiny scar along her left jaw that no amount of civilian softness could hide. His lips moved. No one heard it. Grace did. "Wraith!" The room tilted. The nearest operator snapped his head toward Grace. What did he call her? Kessler looked from Rourke to Grace. "Out! Now!" Grace reached for the decompression kit. Kessler grabbed her wrist. That was his mistake. It was also the moment Coronado Naval Medical Center stopped knowing who it was dealing with. Grace turned his wrist 1 inch. Not far. Not enough to break. Enough to make every tendon scream. Kessler gasped and dropped to one knee. Grace caught the decompression needle with her free hand. No wasted motion, no hesitation. She ripped open the package with her teeth, found the landmark through blood and torn fabric, and drove the 14-gauge catheter into Rourke's left chest. A sharp hiss filled the bay. Rourke's chest rose. The monitor climbed from 69 to 78, then 83. Molly stared with both hands over her mouth. Pierce whispered, "How did she?" Grace did not look at anyone. "Suction, bougie, size 7 tube. Prepare crick kit if airway fails. He has 30 seconds. No one moved. Grace lifted her eyes. "Move." They moved. The entire trauma bay obeyed her before anyone understood why. Molly shoved suction into Grace's hand. Pierce grabbed the bougie. A corpsman opened the surgical airway tray with shaking fingers. The operators at the wall exchanged a look that carried recognition and fear in equal measure. Kessler remained on one knee, clutching his wrist. Grace did not spare him a glance. Rourke's oxygen saturation rose to 86, then slipped again. "Blood in airway," Grace said. She placed herself at the head of the bed. "Roll suction with me. Do not chase the blood. Clear the view and hold." Pierce blinked. "You can't intubate him." Grace looked at him. Pierce stepped back. Kessler forced himself up. "This is criminal. She has no privileges for this procedure." Rourke coughed once. Blood sprayed across Grace's sleeve. She lowered the blade with perfect control. not the gentle rhythm of a hospital intubation, the efficient violence of a field airway done under rain, smoke, and rotor wash. Epiglottis visualized, she said. Bougie. Pierce handed it over. Grace passed it. Tube. Molly placed the tube in her palm. Grace advanced it, cuffed it, connected the bag. Ventilate, slow, watch compliance. The respiratory tech squeezed the bag. Rourke's chest rose on both sides. The monitor climbed. 89, 92, 94. The room breathed again. Grace secured the tube with tape. Her hands were steady, too steady. Everyone saw it now. The same hands that had trembled in the corridor did not tremble here. The nearest operator stepped closer. He was tall, broad, early 40s, beard clipped close, eyes sharp under a wet cap, no name on his vest, no rank visible. But command sat on him like armor. "Who are you?" he asked. Grace checked the pressure dressing at Rourke's thigh. "Nurse Holloway. That is not what he called you. He is hypoxic. He called you Wraith." That name hit the room harder than a weapon. One corpsman looked at the operator. Molly looked at Grace. Pierce looked at Kessler, as if the surgeon might explain why a dying SEAL had spoken a ghost name to a quiet nurse. Grace pressed 2 fingers into Rourke's femoral pulse. Weak, thready, wrong. "His junctional bleed is not controlled." Kessler found his voice again. "His thigh wound is packed. We have vascular upstairs." "It is not the thigh," Grace said. "It is inguinal, high, pelvic edge. Your dressing is too low." "You are guessing." Grace tore away the outer dressing. Dark blood surged beneath the groin fold. Molly made a small sound. Grace's hand drove down hard, heel of palm pressing the femoral artery against bone. Rourke's body jerked despite sedation. "Pressure now," Grace said. "Combat gauze, junctional tourniquet if you have one." Pierce stared. "We don't stock junctional tourniquets." Grace's expression went flat. "In a naval hospital." No one answered. "Then get me hemostatic gauze, 2 trauma pads, elastic wrap, and a pelvic binder." Kessler barked a laugh. "This is insane. You are improvising battlefield care in my trauma bay." Grace looked at him for the first time since he grabbed her wrist. "Your trauma bay is alive because battlefield care arrived before your ego killed him." Silence. The operator's mouth tightened, almost a smile. Kessler's face went red. "You are finished here." "No," the operator said. His voice was low but absolute. Kessler turned. "You do not control this hospital." "Tonight I do." The operator moved closer, rain dripping from his gear onto the polished floor. "Chief Rourke is under operational protection. This facility received prior notice that a classified casualty might arrive. Your administration accepted federal command integration for the emergency window." "Bull," Pierce swallowed. "No one told us that." "That is an administrative failure, not my problem." Kessler pointed at Grace. "She assaulted me." The operator glanced at his wrist. "Looks attached." A few eyes dropped. Kessler flushed darker. Grace kept pressure on Rourke's artery. Her arm was locked, her shoulder steady. Blood soaked through her glove and down her wrist. "I need gauze," she said. Molly moved first. Then everyone moved. The bay became sound and motion again. Packaging tore. Monitors beeped. Warm blood units arrived. Pierce placed a central line under Grace's direction without quite admitting he was taking her direction. The respiratory tech adjusted ventilator settings. The corpsman started the massive transfusion protocol. Kessler stood useless near the wall. He had never looked smaller. Grace packed the wound with hemostatic gauze, inch by inch, forcing it deep toward the bleeding source. Rourke's blood pressure trembled at 72/40, then 78, then 84. "Hold pressure," she told Pierce. "Where?" Grace guided his hand. "Here, down and back. If he curses in his sleep, you are close." Pierce obeyed. Grace secured the pack with folded trauma pads and elastic wrap angled around the pelvis. Not perfect. Enough to buy minutes. Minutes were life. Call vascular. Call surgery. Tell them this is not a consult. This is movement. He goes now. Pierce nodded. Kessler stepped forward. I am the attending surgeon. I decide when... The operator moved between him and Grace. You decide nothing until command reviews why your team was unprepared for an authorized classified casualty. Kessler stared. Who are you? The operator removed one glove slowly. Commander Jack Vale, Naval Special Warfare. The title struck like a door slamming shut. Even Kessler knew enough to stop talking. Vale turned back to Grace. His eyes searched her face. Not rudely, carefully, like a man looking at a photograph that had been burned and trying to remember the original. Rourke called you Wraith, he said. Grace stripped off her bloody gloves. He needs surgery. I asked who you are, and I answered. Vale stepped closer. I have been in the teams 18 years. I have heard that call sign twice, both times from men who did not say it casually. Grace reached for a clean pair of gloves. Then you know men say strange things while dying. He is not dying now, because of you. Grace looked at Rourke. His pressure was 90/50, still bad, better than dead. Surgery arrived at the bay doors with a transport team. The lead surgeon, Captain Elise Ward, entered tying her mask behind her head. She was in her 50s. Grey hair tucked into a cap, eyes bright and severe. Status. Kessler opened his mouth. Ward ignored him and looked at Grace. Grace gave the report in 19 seconds. Blast exposure. Left tension decompressed with 14 gauge. Airway secured with 7 tube after blood obstruction. Junctional hemorrhage, high left inguinal. Impact with hemostatic gauze and direct pressure. MTP initiated. Current BP 90/50. Pulse 120. SAT 94 ventilated. Possible pelvic involvement. Needs or now. Ward stared at her, not shocked, evaluating. Name? Grace Holloway, RN. Who trained you? Grace said nothing. Ward's eyes narrowed. Then she turned to her team. Move him. They rolled Rourke out. Vale followed 2 steps behind, then paused at the door. Holloway. Grace looked up. Do not leave the hospital. It was not a request. Grace's face remained still. I have patience. You have questions waiting. He left. The bay emptied around her. The sudden quiet felt louder than the chaos. Blood pooled under the trauma table. Used packaging covered the floor. A smear of red marked the side of Grace's bright blue scrub top. Her cheek had darkened where Kessler struck her. Molly stood near the monitor, pale. Pierce removed his gloves slowly. Kessler breathed through his nose like a bull. Then he smiled. Not wide. Worse. Controlled. You just ended your career, he said. Grace turned toward the sink. Maybe. Maybe, he laughed once. You assaulted an attending surgeon, performed invasive procedures beyond nursing scope, interfered with trauma command, and exposed this facility to federal review. Grace washed blood from her hands. The water ran pink. The patient lived. That does not protect you. It protects him. Kessler stepped closer. Grace saw the movement in the reflection of the metal cabinet. Molly saw it too. Doctor, Molly said, voice small. Kessler ignored her. You think those operators will save you? They will disappear behind classified paperwork by morning. I will still be here. Grace turned off the faucet. I know. Administration will remove you tonight. Your license will be reviewed. Your little act of heroism will become a liability report. Grace dried her hands. Then write it accurately. Kessler blinked. What? Write that you grabbed me from behind in a blind corridor. Write that you struck me. Write that you ordered a medication for an allergic patient earlier today. Write that you missed a tension pneumothorax and a junctional bleed in a special warfare casualty. Write that your hands were empty while mine were keeping him alive. The room went still. Molly's lips parted. Pierce looked at the floor. Kessler's face turned white around the mouth. "Careful," he whispered. Grace stepped closer. Not much. Just enough for him to feel the difference. Her shoulders were no longer rounded. Her head was no longer lowered. The same woman stood before him, but the shape had changed. "No," Grace said. "You be careful." A sound broke the moment. Slow clapping from the bay entrance. Everyone turned. Hospital Director Warren Lyle stood there in a navy suit, silver hair combed back, jaw tight. Beside him was Commander Vale. Behind them stood 2 Shore Patrol officers and Captain Ward's surgical liaison. Lyle lowered his hands. "Nurse Holloway," he said, "my office, now." Kessler's smile returned. "Gladly," Grace said. Molly stepped forward. "Sir, I saw Dr. Kessler." "Not another word," Lyle said. Molly froze. Grace looked at her. Tiny shake of the head. "Stay alive." They walked through the hospital in a strange procession. Lyle in front, Grace behind him, Vale beside her but not touching. Shore Patrol trailing 2 steps back. Staff stared from doorways. Whispers followed. "That's her. The nurse from Bay 1. She dropped Kessler. No, she saved that SEAL. Who is she?" Grace heard all of it. She also heard the hospital itself. Air handlers, elevator cables, distant monitor alarms, rain against windows. Boots changing tempo behind her. Vale matched her pace. "You are limping," he said quietly. "No." "Left side. Old injury." Grace did not answer. "Rourke knew you. Many patients confuse faces. He called you by a classified call sign." Grace stopped walking. Vale stopped too. For 1 second, only the 2 of them existed in the corridor. "Commander," she said softly, "if you know enough to be curious, you know enough to stop asking in public." Vale's eyes changed. Respect arrived first, then caution. Lyle turned from the elevator. "Is there a problem?" Grace resumed walking. "No, sir." The administrative floor smelled nothing like the ER. Lemon polish, fresh carpet, coffee from machines no nurse could afford. Framed photographs of admirals lined the walls. In every photo, Lyle stood near power, but never quite at the center of it. His office overlooked the bay. Ships moved in the dark water beyond the glass. Lyle sat behind his desk. Grace remained standing. Vale did too. Lyle looked at him. "Commander, this is a personnel matter. This is an operational matter. It involves my nurse. It involves my patient." Lyle's smile was thin. "Your patient is in surgery because my staff responded." Vale's face did not move. "Your staff almost lost him. She did not." Lyle folded his hands. "Nurse Holloway, you are suspended effective immediately pending investigation into unauthorized procedures and assault against Dr. Kessler." Grace nodded once. "Understood." Vale turned sharply. "You cannot be serious." Lyle ignored him. "You will surrender your badge. You will not enter patient care areas. You will provide a written statement by morning." Grace unclipped her badge. For 8 months that badge had been her shield, a cheap plastic rectangle that said she was ordinary. She placed it on the desk. Lyle looked satisfied. "And understand this clearly. If you attempt to use tonight's classified situation to protect yourself, I will make sure the board knows you exploited a military emergency to conceal misconduct." Grace looked at him. The old self inside her went very quiet. "You knew he was coming," she said. Lyle's smile faded. "Excuse me?" "Commander Vale said the facility received prior notice of a classified casualty window. Your trauma team was not briefed. Your equipment was incomplete. Your security camera in the East Corridor was turned away. Kessler had fresh blood on his shoe before the casualty arrived." Vale's head turned slightly. Lyle's face hardened. "You are making dangerous claims." "No," Grace said. "I am making a list." For the first time, Lyle looked uncertain. Only for a second. Then the administrator returned. "Get her out!" The Shore Patrol officers stepped forward. Vale blocked them. Nobody touches her. Lyle stood. "Commander, you are overstepping." Vale's phone buzzed. He checked the screen. His expression changed. "Rourke is out of surgery." Grace's breath caught before she could stop it. Vale saw that too. "He is alive," Vale said, "and asking for Wraith." The name filled Lyle's office like smoke. Lyle went still. "What did you say?" Vale looked at Grace. "He said only one person on this base knows what Blue Lantern 3 means. He said if she is here, the hospital is already compromised." Lyle's face lost color. Grace watched him. There it was. Fear, not confusion. Fear. He knew the code, or he knew enough to fear it. Grace reached for her badge again. Lyle slapped his hand over it. "You are suspended." Grace met his eyes. "Then suspend me after I find out who tried to kill Chief Rourke before he reached your doors." Vale stepped closer to Lyle's desk. "Director, I suggest you move your hand." Lyle did not. Grace did, not violently. She placed 2 fingers on his wrist and pressed a nerve point with the calm precision of someone opening a locked drawer. Lyle gasped and lifted his hand. Grace picked up the badge. Vale's mouth twitched. "Still suspended?" Grace asked. Lyle cradled his wrist. "You have no idea what you're walking into." Grace clipped the badge to her blood-stained scrubs. "That is what people keep telling me." Vale opened the office door. "Then let's ask Rourke." Commander Vale did not take Grace Holloway straight to the ICU. He took her into the stairwell and let the door shut behind them. No monitors, no shouting, no squeaking wheels, no doctors pretending they were not terrified. Just concrete walls, fluorescent light, and the sound of Grace breathing through a night that had already split her life in half. Vale stood 1 step below her. His eyes moved from the dried blood on her bright blue scrubs to the bruise forming near her throat. "Wraith," he said. Grace did not answer. "Chief Rourke said that name twice after surgery. He said if Wraith was in this hospital, then this hospital was already compromised." Grace looked toward the ICU floor. "Then why are we standing here?" "Because I need to know whether I am protecting a nurse, detaining a suspect, or standing beside a classified operator whose record has been erased by people above my pay grade." Grace's jaw tightened. "You do not have my record." Vale reached into his jacket and unfolded 1 printed page. It was not a full file. It was worse. A single photograph. Grace's younger face stared from the page. Shorter hair. Salt water on her cheek. A black bar over her real assignment. Another over the mission name. But one thing had not been blacked out. Wraith. Grace felt the old world open beneath her feet. "Where did you get that?" "From a man who told me this page did not exist. Then he lied." "People keep doing that tonight." Grace looked away. Whole deck under her knees. Blood under her palms. Rourke laughing through broken teeth while she told him he was too ugly to die. Radio silence where rescue should have been. The order to withdraw. The order she disobeyed. Vale folded the page. "What is Blue Lantern 3? Grace stayed silent. Chief Rourke came in half dead repeating that code. Lyle went pale when he heard it. "Kessler attacked you before the casualty arrived. The East Corridor camera was moved. I am done accepting silence as an answer." Grace looked at him. Blue Lantern was an extraction phrase. 3 meant internal betrayal. It meant the threat was already inside the friendly facility. Vale absorbed that. His face did not change, but his hand closed around the paper. And Rourke knew that code because he was there. Yes. Where? A place that never happened. The stairwell door opened above them. Jimmy Hale stepped onto the landing with coffee and a terrified face. "Rourke is asking for you," he whispered. He also said the man who stabbed him smelled like the pink almond hospital soap from the East Corridor. Grace went still. The East Corridor used a new supply vendor. Most of the hospital did not. Vale opened the door. "We go to Rourke. Now." Chief Daniel Rourke looked like death had filed paperwork and lost jurisdiction. He lay in the ICU with a bandaged torso, 2 IV lines, and a face drained of color. Machines watched him with cold patience, but his eyes were open, sharp, angry, alive. They found Grace first. For a moment, neither spoke. The room fell away. Grace was back on black water. Rourke was younger, bleeding through her hands, refusing to pass out because she kept threatening to haunt him if he died. Now he tried to smile. "You got old," he rasped. Grace stepped closer. "You got careless." His cracked lips twitched. "Still mean. Still alive. Barely. Barely counts." Vale stood at the foot of the bed. "Chief, who attacked you?" Rourke's humor vanished. "Man in hospital shoes, surgical cap, mask, knew the ambulance route, knew where my armor separated, called me chief before he cut me." Grace leaned closer. Voice? Low, calm, not Kessler. "What did he say?" Rourke swallowed through pain. "Tell Wraith the water remembers." The words hit Grace harder than any hand on her throat. Vale saw it. "What does that mean?" Rourke answered before Grace could. "It means Meridian is not buried." Vale turned. "Meridian?" Grace closed her eyes once. Meridian. The mission that did not exist. The extraction route sold to the enemy. The report she filed. The report that disappeared. The reason she left the only world where her hands had ever made sense. Rourke's monitor quickened. Grace reached for the pain pump. He caught her wrist weakly. "No. Need clear head. You need to stay alive. Then listen fast." Vale stepped closer. Rourke's voice thinned. "There is a list. Surviving names from Meridian. Operators. Medics. Interpreters. Anyone who knew the route was sold. Someone is cleaning it." Grace felt cold move through her. "Where is the list?" "North Pier locker. But I sent a copy." "To who?" His eyes locked on hers. "You, old channel. Dead drop." Grace shook her head. "I never received anything." "Then someone intercepted the alert." Vale looked from one to the other. "Who sold the route?" Rourke's face twisted. "Then Captain Thomas Arlen, now Rear Admiral Arlen." Vale went silent. Jimmy whispered from the door. "That sounds extremely above my training level." Grace ignored him. "Arlen is coming here." Vale's expression gave the answer before his mouth did. "Tomorrow morning. Casualty review." Rourke closed his eyes. "Too late. He is already here through other hands." Grace's phone buzzed. "Unknown number. Laundry room, basement, 10 minutes. Come alone, or Rourke dies twice." She showed Vale. His answer was instant. "No. They know I am here. We send a team. They will see a team. This is my hospital." Grace looked at Rourke. "And my ghost." Rourke opened his eyes. "Do not go alone." Grace almost smiled. "You just told me I am on a kill list. That was not permission to act stupid." "Good. I hate acting." Vale exhaled through his nose. "Fine. You go visible, we go invisible. Shore patrol covers exits. Jimmy knows the basement layout." Jimmy froze. "I know the vending machine steals quarters." "Good enough," Vale said. Grace shook her head. "He is not trained." Jimmy lifted a hand. "I once survived a night shift with 3 surgeons and no coffee filters. Not the same. Emotionally comparable." Grace did not like it, but the basement had vents, laundry chutes, and service corridors. Jimmy could move there without alarming anyone. That made him useful. Grace leaned over Rourke. "Stay alive. Bossy. Effective." The basement smelled like bleach, rust, and wet linen. Grace entered through the west stairwell with her badge clipped over bloodstained scrubs and both hands empty. Nothing about her looked armed. The laundry corridor stretched under yellow light. Dryers rumbled. Steam hissed from an old pipe. Somewhere above, Jimmy was crawling through maintenance access and probably regretting being brave. Grace stopped outside the linen intake room. "I am here." A man stepped from the shadows in a maintenance jacket, surgical mask, and navy blue cap, average height, average build, designed to disappear. But his shoes were operating room clogs, and the almond soap clung to him. He held a compact pistol low at his side. "Hands up!" Grace raised them. "You cut Rourke." He moved. "People do that when stabbed." The man's eyes smiled above the mask. "You are calmer than they said. They talk too much. They said you left the war behind. People say hopeful things." He stepped closer. His right grip was steady. His left knee carried old weakness. The pistol was too close. "You will open the dead drop," he said. "You will give me the file. Then you return to your little life. Nurse Holloway, night shifts, bad coffee, men like Kessler putting hands on you while you pretend it does not bother you." Grace kept her voice flat. "Kessler worked for you?" "Kessler is a weak man who enjoys permission. Weak men are useful." "Where is he?" "Gone." A faint click came from the ceiling vent. "Jimmy." Grace shifted half an inch. The pistol rose. "Do not." She stopped. "Meridian was not a mistake," the man said. "It was a transaction. You ruined it by saving men who were supposed to die." Grace felt rage rise. Quiet, old, useful. "Who are you?" "Nobody. Nobody usually talks less." Her hidden radio buzzed once against her waistband. Vale's signal. Exits covered. The man's eyes dipped. Grace moved. She kicked the brake off a linen cart and drove it into his bad knee. The pistol fired once. The round punched into a dryer door. Steam burst white across the corridor. Grace trapped his gun wrist against the cart frame, turned under his elbow, and stripped the weapon free. He was fast. She was faster. He slammed her into the wall. Pain flashed through her shoulder. He reached for a blade. Grace caught his wrist and saw the small tattoo under his sleeve. A black lantern. Meridian. Jimmy's voice cracked through the vent. "Grace, down!" She dropped. A heavy bag of wet linens fell from the chute and smashed onto the man's head and shoulders. He staggered. Grace rose, swept his knee, and pinned him face down with his own arm locked behind him. Vale and Shore Patrol rushed in. "Weapon secure!" Jimmy shouted. "Also, I hate vents forever." Vale ripped the mask away. His expression changed. "Lieutenant Owen Rask, NCIS Liaison, Base Security Review." Rask laughed into the concrete. "Slow as always, Vale." Grace crouched beside him. "Who sent you?" Rask turned his head enough to look at her. "Ask what you stole, Wraith." "I stole 2 lives from the water." "No, you stole Arlen's future." Vale's face hardened. Rask smiled. "Rear Admiral Arlen arrives at 800. He wants his ghost delivered breathing." Grace stood. By sunrise, the hospital no longer pretended to be only a hospital. Shore Patrol guarded every entrance. Investigators sealed the basement laundry. The East Corridor camera was removed, bagged, and carried away. Staff badges were scanned twice. Doctors whispered less loudly when Grace passed. Grace stood in a secure conference room with Vale, Jimmy, and 2 investigators, while Rourke's recovered dive watch sat inside an evidence pouch. Vale looked at it. "You are sure?" Grace nodded. Rourke never trusted phones. Jimmy leaned over the table. "Of course he hides classified evidence in a watch. I hide mints in my locker and thought I was mysterious." Grace opened the watchback with a sterile blade. Inside was a waterproof data strip smaller than a fingernail. The investigator placed it into an air-gapped reader. One video file appeared. Rourke's face filled the screen. Not wounded. Recorded before the attack. His eyes were hard and tired. "If this reaches Wraith, then I am dead, or close enough. Grace, you were right about Meridian. The route was sold by Thomas Arlen, then a captain attached to Joint Maritime Planning. He buried your report, erased Samir, and used the cover-up to build his career. I found payments, transfer orders, medical flags, and a list of everyone still alive who can prove it." Grace did not move. Rourke continued. Your hiring at the Naval Hospital was not random. Lyle placed you there after your civilian license search triggered a match. Kessler was used to provoke you. Rask was used to watch you. They needed to know whether Grace Holloway was still Wraith. Jimmy whispered. They turned your job into a trap. Grace stared at the screen. No, they turned me into proof. Rourke's recorded voice grew softer. There is a second file. It needs the old phrase. If you open it, Arlen will know. If you do not, he wins. Finish it. No one left in the water. The video ended. The room held its breath. Vale looked at Grace. We need a plan before you open the second file. Grace reached for the keyboard. Opening it is the plan. That is not a plan. Jimmy nodded. That is a haunted door. Grace typed the phrase, no one left in the water. The reader flashed red, then green. The second file opened. Names appeared first, 43 of them. Some marked deceased, some marked located, some marked pending. Rourke was marked contained. Grace found herself 3 lines below. Grace Holloway, Wraith status confirmed, action pending. Vale's voice dropped. Action pending. Grace scrolled further. Payments, messages, personnel notes, medical transfers, harassment reports, security changes. Then a document titled Public Discredit Option. Vale opened it. Grace read in silence. Combat trauma history, alleged instability, workplace insubordination, assault on physician, interference with classified casualty, recommended narrative, former covert medical operator suffering dissociative episode, fabricates conspiracy after attacking hospital staff. Jimmy's face went pale. They were going to make you look insane. Grace looked at the screen. No. Dangerous. The conference room phone rang. Vale answered on speaker. Director Lyle's strained voice came through. Commander, Rear Admiral Arlen has arrived early. He requests all department heads in the main auditorium. He specifically requests Nurse Holloway. A second voice entered. Smooth. Older. Familiar. Commander, bring her! Grace felt 12 years collapse into one breath. Arlen. Vale's jaw tightened. Admiral, this is an active investigation. It is now a command matter. Bring Nurse Holloway, or I will have her brought. Grace stepped toward the phone. Hello, Captain. Silence. The old rank landed like a blade. Arlen answered softly. That was a long time ago. Not long enough. You sound tired, Wraith. You sound alive. That keeps surprising me. Jimmy's eyebrows rose so high they nearly left his face. Arlen's voice hardened. Auditorium. 10 minutes. Do not make this uglier than it has to be. The line went dead. Vale looked at Grace. He wants an audience. Then we give him one. The auditorium was full by 08:30. Doctors, nurses, corpsmen, security, administrators and military staff filled the rows. Rumor had done what orders could not. Everyone knew something was happening. Nobody knew enough. Rear Admiral Thomas Arlen stood on stage in dress blues, polished and calm. 2 aides stood behind him. So did 3 armed men Grace did not recognize. Grace entered through the side door with Vale on her left and Jimmy behind her carrying the laptop. The room turned. Whispers rippled. Bright blue scrubs, blood at the cuffs, bruise at her neck, badge clipped straight. This time, Grace did not lower her head. Arlen smiled. Nurse Holloway, please sit. Grace remained standing. I am fine. I was not asking. Vale stepped forward. Admiral. Arlen lifted a hand. Commander, this matter has exceeded your authority. As of this morning, Command Review has determined that Nurse Holloway represents a security risk. She is to be relieved of duties, escorted to medical evaluation, and held pending psychological review. The room erupted in whispers. Grace looked at Lyle in the front row. He would not meet her eyes. Arlen continued, Last night, This nurse assaulted a physician, interfered with a classified casualty, attacked a federal liaison in the basement, and made accusations against senior officers without evidence. The evidence is here, Vale said. Arlen gave him a cold look. Be careful, Commander. Careers have ended over loyalty to unstable personnel. Grace spoke before Vale could. You always liked that word. Arlen's eyes moved to her. Excuse me. Unstable. You used it in the Meridian report after I refused the withdrawal order. You said my testimony was compromised by combat stress. You said the 2 men I pulled from the water were not reliable because they were wounded. Arlen smiled for the room. I do not know what fantasy you are describing. Grace took Rourke's watch from her pocket. His eyes dropped to it, only for a fraction of a second. Enough. Chief Rourke recorded a statement before he was attacked, Grace said. He named you. He documented payments, medical flags, and a list of surviving witnesses marked for containment. Arlen's aides shifted. The private security men moved subtly. Vale saw it. So did Grace. Arlen chuckled. A wounded SEAL under medication and a traumatized nurse. That is not evidence. No, Grace said. This is... Jimmy connected the laptop to the auditorium screen. For one terrible second, nothing happened. Jimmy whispered, Please do not betray democracy, you overpriced rectangle. The screen lit. Rourke's recorded face appeared behind Arlen. Gasps filled the room. The video played. Every word, Meridian, Arlen, Lyle, Kessler, Rask, the hospital trap. Grace's real identity. By the end, the room was silent. Grace stepped forward. This hospital was used to identify people someone wanted erased. Chief Rourke was attacked before he reached care. I was placed here to confirm whether I was Wraith. Dr. Kessler assaulted me because he had permission from men who thought cruelty would make me react. Director Lyle obstructed the investigation because he was protecting the chain above him. Lyle stood. That is not true. Grace looked at him. Sit down. He sat. No one laughed. Arlen turned from the screen. This display changes nothing. Vale moved toward the stage. Rear Admiral Arlen, you are being detained pending investigation. With the nearest private guard drew, Grace moved first. She drove a chair into his arm before the weapon cleared leather. The gun fired upward. Ceiling plaster burst. People screamed and ducked. Vale tackled the second man. Shore Patrol flooded in from both doors. The third guard shoved Arlen toward the rear exit. Grace vaulted onto the stage and intercepted the aide at the curtain. He swung. She slipped under it, struck twice, and dropped him beside the podium. Arlen reached the rear door. It opened from the other side. Chief Rourke stood there in a hospital gown, blanket over his shoulders, IV taped to one arm, and murder in his eyes. An ICU nurse stood behind him, looking furious. He refused to stay, she snapped. Rourke leaned against the frame. Going somewhere, Admiral? For the first time, Arlen looked afraid. Not of Grace. Of the dead refusing to stay buried. Grace stepped beside Rourke. You should be in bed. You should be retired. I was. Terrible at it. Vale approached with 2 officers. Rear Admiral Thomas Arlen, you are detained for conspiracy, obstruction, attempted murder, and violations of military law. Arlen straightened his uniform. You have no idea what you're doing. Meridian protected national interests. Rourke's voice was gravel. You sold our route. I made a hard choice. Grace looked at him. No, you made a profitable one. The officers took Arlen. As they led him past the rows, no one spoke. Doctors who had laughed at Grace watched a rear admiral leave in restraints. Nurses who had lowered their eyes watched a quiet woman in blue scrubs stand with blood on her sleeves and command in her spine. Jimmy crawled from behind the media table with the laptop clutched to his chest. I saved the computer, he said. Also myself, in that order by accident. Vale looked at the bullet hole in the ceiling, then at Grace. You exposed a rear admiral in front of half the hospital. Grace adjusted Rourke's blanket. He asked for an audience. Security irregularity, senior personnel detained, ongoing investigation, no current threat to patients. It said nothing about Meridian, nothing about Wraith, nothing about a rear admiral being taken from a naval hospital auditorium while a nurse in bright blue scrubs stood under a bullet hole in the ceiling. But hospitals do not need official statements to understand truth. Truth moves in whispers. By noon, every floor knew Grace Holloway had been attacked, had saved Chief Rourke, had fought Rask in the basement, and had exposed Arlen in front of everyone. By 1400, nobody called her quiet nurse anymore. Grace sat beside Rourke in the ICU because he refused sedation unless she promised to insult him every hour. "You look terrible," she said. His eyes stayed closed. "Weak. Try harder. You look like a man who tried to intimidate a rear admiral while wearing a gown open in the back." "Better." The ICU nurse shook her head from the medication cart. "I am documenting that the patient is impossible." "Classified," Rourke mumbled. Vale entered with coffee and a folder. "Arlen is in secured custody. Rask is talking now that Arlen denies knowing him. Kessler was caught at the south gate in civilian clothes. Lyle has been suspended and detained." Grace looked at the monitor. Rourke's pressure was better. Alive, all scared. The ICU nurse muttered, "Good." Vale opened the folder. "There is more. Meridian Review is being reopened. Your original report is being restored. Samir Haddad's family will receive corrected status and benefits." Grace went still. Samir, the interpreter she had dragged from the water while he begged her not to let his wife think he had betrayed anyone. The man, reduced to an erased footnote because truth was inconvenient. Grace's voice came out low. "His family is alive?" Vale nodded. "Wife and daughter. Michigan. Protected status delayed for years because your report disappeared. That changes now." Rourke reached for Grace's hand. His fingers were cold but strong. "We got one back," he whispered. Grace swallowed. "Not enough." "Never is." Vale placed another page on the table. "There is a command hearing tomorrow. They want your statement." Grace read the first line. Grace Holloway, RN. Under it was a second identifier. "Former Naval Special Warfare Medical Attaché Classified Program. The buried life typed back into existence." "Do I have a choice?" she asked. Vale answered honestly. "Legally, yes. Practically, no. If you do not speak, Arlen's allies will turn this into one unstable nurse, one angry SEAL, and one misunderstood admiral." Rourke snorted. "Misunderstood traitor." The ICU nurse nodded. "Better wording." Grace folded the page. "Then I speak." The command hearing happened behind locked doors. Grace wore bright blue scrubs instead of a suit because the nurse they tried to bury deserved to be seen. She testified about Meridian in short, clean sentences. She named the withdrawal order, the two men left below deck, the route that had been sold, and the report Arlen erased. When asked why she disobeyed, she gave the only answer that mattered. Because the order was wrong. Admiral Hensley restored the original report, protected Grace's civilian position, reopened Samir Haddad's record, and made one thing clear. No one would ever again use Grace's trauma as a weapon against her. Outside the chamber, Jimmy waited with a crushed muffin, and Vale waited without pretending he had not been worried. Grace took the muffin, looked toward the hospital road, and said she was ready to go back. The return was harder than the hearing. At least officers understood silence. Hospital staff filled it with guilt. Grace entered through the main doors at 1540. Conversations stopped. People stared, looked away, then stared again. Two corpsmen snapped to attention. Grace stopped. "Please do not do that in the hallway," they flushed. "Yes, ma'am." At the nurse's station, Kessler's nameplate had been removed from the physician board. Lyle's office door was sealed. Someone had placed a handwritten sign over the complaint box. It will be read now. Jimmy appeared beside her. ICU nurse made that. She threatened administration with a stapler. Good. The stapler or the sign? Both. Doctor. Amelia Cross approached and apologized for hesitating because Kessler had framed Grace as difficult. Grace accepted only one promise. Make sure it does not happen to the next nurse. Cross nodded, ashamed and changed. 3 days later, Rourke was moved from ICU to step-down. He complained about the wheelchair, the food, the blanket, the television, and Grace refusing to let him interrogate Rask from bed. Medical tyranny, he said. Correct, Grace said. Jimmy entered with a pudding cup. Contraband. Grace looked at him. He is on a restricted diet. Jimmy froze. Rourke pointed weakly. Traitor! Jimmy backed away. I was never here. Grace took the pudding. I will return this to nutrition. Rourke sighed. You survived black sites but fear pudding? I fear aspiration pneumonia. He shook his head. Cold woman. A live patient. When Jimmy left, Rourke handed Grace a folded sheet. Hensley left this. It was a proposal. Tactical Clinical Response and Integrity Program. Civilian Director. Based at the Naval Hospital. Nursing Authority. Full autonomy. Attached note from Hensley read, You know what systems look like when they are built by cowards. Build one that is not. Grace read it twice. They want me to lead it. Of course they do, Rourke said. You are annoying and correct. I am not putting on a uniform again. It says civilian. I'm not going back to that life. Maybe this is not going back. Maybe this is building something they cannot bury. Grace looked at the paper. She hated that he was right. 1 week after the attack, the hospital gathered in the same auditorium where Arlen had tried to destroy her. The bullet hole in the ceiling had been patched, but the paint did not match. Grace noticed. So did everyone else. She stood on stage alone. The room was full. Doctors, nurses, corpsmen, cleaners, clerks, security. Grace let them sit with it. Then she spoke. A week ago, many of you believed I was weak because I was quiet. Some believed I was difficult because I documented problems. Some believed I was dangerous because men with rank told you to fear me. No one moved. Here is what this hospital will remember. Quiet is not consent. Documentation is not betrayal. Rank is not character, and a uniform does not make a coward brave. A nurse in the 3rd row wiped her face. Grace continued, This hospital was used as a trap because people stopped questioning authority. Complaints were ignored. Harassment was excused. Nurses were told to stay in their place. Doctors were allowed to confuse ego with leadership. Administrators were allowed to confuse silence with order. That ends now. Vale stood at the back. Jimmy sat near the aisle, unusually serious. Every complaint will be read. Every safety concern will be reviewed. Every staff member has the right to speak when something is wrong. If someone touches you without consent, report it. If someone threatens your license for telling the truth, report it. If rank walks into this building and asks you to ignore what you know is right, do not bow. Call it what it is. Grace paused. And if you are afraid, speak anyway. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is refusing to let fear make your decisions. The room remained silent. Then Dr. Cross stood. One by one, others followed. Nurses first, then corpsmen, then doctors, then security, not applause. Standing. Grace did not smile, but something in her chest loosened. 2 months later, Grace opened the first tactical clinical response class above the ER. Nurses, doctors, corpsmen, and security officers sat before tourniquets, radios, airway kits, and incident forms. Jimmy sat in the back with a notebook labeled Vent Hero. Grace ignored it. She began with one rule. Believe the person closest to the danger. She taught them to read rooms, control bleeding, protect patients, and document truth when power tried to rewrite it. After class, a young nurse admitted Kessler had cornered her months earlier. Grace sat with her while she wrote the report. No rush, no judgment, no one left in the water. 1 year later, the Naval Hospital looked different. Not new. Hospitals never looked new for long, but awake. The East Corridor camera faced the right way. The complaint system was reviewed by 3 independent departments. Kessler had been convicted. Lyle had taken a plea. Rask had named 2 more conspirators. Arlen had lost his rank, his pension, and finally his audience. The Meridian report was restored. Samir's name was engraved where it belonged. Chief Rourke walked without a cane and lied that rehab had been easy. Commander Vale received a commendation and hated the ceremony. Jimmy got his pudding cup and a safety award he insisted should have mentioned the laundry bag. Grace remained in bright blue scrubs. Not dress blues, not a suit, scrubs, because that was the point. One morning, she walked the corridor where Kessler had grabbed her from behind. The linen alcove lights worked now. Staff moved through without fear. Grace stopped in the exact place his hand had touched her neck. For months, she had avoided standing there. Now she stood still. No flashback swallowed her. No old water rose over her head. A young corpsman hurried past, then stopped. "Ma'am, you okay?" Grace looked at him. "Yes," she said, and meant it. The ER doors burst open behind them. "Incoming trauma!" someone shouted. Grace turned. The corpsman looked panicked. She moved toward the sound. "Breathe," she told him, "then move." He did. Inside Trauma Bay 1, a sailor lay bleeding from a machinery accident, femoral wound, pressure failing, too many people talking at once. Grace stepped in. The room quieted, not from fear, from trust. Direct pressure high in the groin, combat gauze, tourniquet ready but not first, 2 large-bore IVs, type and cross, call vascular now. Hands moved, fast and correct. A young nurse pressed where Grace showed her. "Like this?" "Exactly. Do not let go." The sailor groaned. Grace leaned close. "Look at me. You are in a hospital. You are alive. Stay that way." The monitor steadied, blood pressure held. The team moved as one. Later, after the sailor went to surgery alive, Grace washed blood from her hands. Vale appeared in the doorway with 2 coffees. Another one saved. Grace dried her hands. The team saved him. You built the team. They chose to become one. Vale accepted the correction. Across the ER, Jimmy waved a pudding cup like a flag. Rourke limped beside him, pretending the limp was temporary. Grace shook her head. The past was still there. It always would be. Meridian, the water, the dead, the report, the names restored too late and the lives saved just in time. But the past no longer owned the room. Grace did. Not as Wraith alone, not as Nurse Holloway alone. As both. A quiet nurse, a hidden operator. A woman men had tried to bury under shame, paperwork, rank, and fear. They had grabbed her from behind because they thought she was weak. They had humiliated her because they thought silence meant surrender. They had built a trap because they thought a woman who wanted peace would not fight back. They were wrong. Grace Holloway had learned the lesson the hard way. Respect is not created by rank. It is not protected by titles. It is not proven by cruelty or power over someone smaller. Respect is earned in the moment when no one is watching, in the report filed when silence is safer, in the hand that stays steady when blood covers the floor, in the voice that says no when everyone else lowers their head, and sometimes in the quiet nurse who finally turns around. The end